Welcome, guys. Sorry it took a little while here, but we are now live from Take a Hike Studios just outside of Dallas, Texas. I am your host, Christian Tatch, and this is College Football Now. All right, so before we get started, I wanted to go over a couple little ground rules before we get too far into this. So, absolutely no politics going to be talked here on this channel or in the fan chat or comment section at all. Absolutely no attacks on race, religion, creed, gender, or sexual preference. And let's try to keep it civil here, shall we? So, moving forward, again, I am your host, Christian Tatch. We are located just outside of Dallas, Texas. A little bit about me. I have an affiliation with Texas A&M University. However, this show is going to be completely and utterly non-biased. So, that being said, let's go on. Couple of things that I wanted to kind of start off with is explaining to you really what these podcasts are going to be about. And what we're going to do now is explain the kind of the format, right? Excuse me. Typically each week what we're going to do is kind of talk about last week's actions and during the game weekends, talk about the good matchups that we did see, some of the results. We'll usually go over the top 25, and then I will start talking about the upcoming games for the coming weekend in order to kind of give my predictions, see what you guys think, and all of that. So this is the first initial weekend. There's only 2 games on this weekend. So we're going to do things a little bit differently. Actually going to predict some things for the season, how I feel about things, welcoming your comments and what you guys think. So as we're getting started, I'd like to go ahead and invite anybody that's on right now to kind of chime in there on the fan chat and let us know where you're from and what your allegiance is as far as your team or your university that you like to follow. So as we're doing that, what we're gonna do is, Philip, that was actually pretty funny. I like that. That was good. I am going to make sure that I do get the chat going here live so that we are looking at the right one. And as I do that, again, make sure y'all shout yes. That's Michael Tatch, by the way. That is a graduate of Texas A&M University, class of '73. Guess you can't tell by his last name, but we are related. So you're going to go ahead and put this on here. Yeah, YouTube decided to kind of change their streaming key for this particular video at the last moment, so we'll get that worked out for the next time around, I promise. But moving forward, so first thing I wanted to kind of go over was there were a couple of major changes done to the rules for college football this year in 2019. One of them is going to be the overtime, and how is that going to be affected moving forward? Sean Pendleton, that's right. You are a Sooner out there. The lone one here at the moment, but I'm pretty sure as future episodes come up, you're not going to be the only one. I know of a couple that are actually going to be joining at some point. But some of the rule changes that happened, I picked the 2. There's a bunch of little ones. They're kind of hard to explain, really kind of hard to understand. One gentleman that'll be on here from time to time, he's actually... he's a chain gang ref there for college level, but he's also a full ref for the high school levels. So he's got a better understanding, so we can ask him some questions at some point about some rules that we see or some things that went into play during a game. I remember a couple years ago, Oklahoma State kind of got screwed over by in a game against a nobody team that they got an extra play and ended up winning, and he had some very good advice about how that actually worked. But one of the changes is going to be the overtime. That's way different now. So the overtime rules, as they are now, as everybody knows, is each team gets a chance from the 25-yard line, and they play from the 25-yard line into the to the end zone or for a field goal, just like everything else. You have first downs, you have four downs to make the first down and get in. That all stays the same moving forward for the first five overtimes. However, after that, there's no more starting from the 25. There's no more first downs. There's no more anything. No more field goals. It is going to be alternating 2-point conversion plays until the winner's determined. So, depending on the progression, if the first team scores, the second team has a chance from the 2-point conversion play, and if they don't, it's over. They still flip-flop, but the reason why they did this is not necessarily the length of the games and stuff like that. The end of the season last year, we saw a 7 overtime game between Texas A&M and LSU. Went way late into the night, which wasn't really the complaint from the players and the coaches. There was a big concern about safety. They basically played over 2 games just straight through. And as you can imagine, that's going to take a toll on these bodies, especially these bigger bodies out there. They're getting hit every single play. They're just exhausted. Mistakes can happen. You're not blocking right. You're not hitting right. You're not dodging correctly. So it really raised a concern, a safety concern for the players. So this is going to, 5 overtimes to me is still a lot. We very rarely have a game that hits that. But if it does, that's the new rule moving forward. I like it. Let's see if we actually hit that this year and see how it plays out. The next big rule, and this one affected a lot of teams out there last year. I know for a fact there were several teams, Texas A&M included, that had multiple games where there were targeting calls. And the problem with the way they're doing the targeting calls these days is they have a series of guidelines. And what they were doing is they were doing a review that says, if any of the guidelines for a targeting call are met, it is a targeting call. Also, they could, if they reversed the targeting call, there was no lesser penalty that they could enforce. So, here's what they did to change this. First of all, it's all reviewed. Again, if they feel there's a targeting, it has to be reviewed on the field and in the booth. But the difference is this time is that they have to review it and confirm that all elements of targeting were present during that play. If not all of them were present, then the call will not stand and they can reduce it to a lesser penalty. So that's a good thing. I think that we ran into a lot of issues last year with the targeting rule the way it was. Simple things like a running back has the ball, he's running down there, defensive player comes up to hit him. Now the defensive player is trying to hit the guy low. The offensive player, bracing for it, also ducks down low, covers the ball, and there's an unintentional helmet to helmet. And there were several times last year that intention was not at play when they made the call. They assumed that, helmet to helmet, that's one thing, that's one box that's checked. We're calling this targeting. So that is another change that I really like, that they're really going to have to scrutinize the targeting call a little bit more in the review booth. The other thing that I like, I'm not sure if I like, this is kind of a weird thing. If they do this first part of the rule correctly and the reviews correctly, the second part of this rule makes sense. You don't want to have habitual offenders. And it's both on the players and the coaches. They've got to be able to coach towards how to tackle and how to avoid these targeting penalties. So one of the new parts of this rule now is, as we all know, if a player gets called for a targeting penalty during the first half of the game, they are ejected and they do not play the rest of the game. If they are hit with a targeting call in the second half of the game, they leave the game and they miss the first half of the next game. So what they're doing now, that still happens. However, if a player commits 3 targeting fouls in the same season and it's actually reviewed, called, he is ejected for targeting, if that happens 3 times in the same season, they can face an additional 1 game suspension. So they're really going to have to coach against this. They're really going to have to, the players are going to have to watch what they're doing. But this also lies on the refs and the booth. They really need to make sure that they're calling these correctly and that they're doing their jobs reviewing. So, anyways, those are the major rules that happened, rule changes that happened over the season or the off season. I like both of them. I think they needed to be changed, and let's see how we go moving forward. So, and you're right, Mike, that sometimes the offensive player does do the targeting, and I don't remember that being really called last year, at least not in any of the games that I watched. And I believe it should be. If they're drawing this, then they should be liable for it too. Rob, I see your point as well. Everybody, Rob Alexander is on. He's the one I was telling you about. Does a little bit more in depth with the rule books there as far as reffing. And you're right. There's never been an official on the rules committee, and there should be. These guys are the ones that are living it in there. So, and yeah, Sean, I agree that this is going to cause more arguments during the game, but I think there's a little more checks and balance now. It's the next step. I'm not saying that this is not, or that this is the end of the road for these rule changes. They ran a couple of years with the existing targeting rule. I think they're going to run a year or two with the new one. My understanding is that they're supposed to get some coaches' input throughout the year on this. So hopefully this keeps moving in the right direction. I feel like the player safety is really important, and I don't blame them for doing some of this. But it needs to be more accountable. All right, so now we got the rules out of the way. Let's talk about some fun stuff, shall we? So, college football. Here's what we're going to talk about now. There is always a that's true. The new blindside block rules are also they're a little finicky, and I've heard from some coaches that they are they're hard to coach right now. We'll see how it goes. The first couple of games are going to be telling, because the first week most of the games are big school versus little school kind of a thing. You may not see as much then, but you are starting in the second week. There's some big games that are going on the second week. So we all know about the rankings, and what happens with the preseason rankings. But before we go into those here at the bottom of the screen, I also want to talk about something else that's kind of pointless. Don't really understand why they put these out so early. But they do, and that is the Heisman watch list. They bring these out, and I've did some research and found out the top 5 guys that they have out there that they're watching from right off the bat, and from order from least to greatest, I guess, in that list, or however they're voting right now on this list, is first of all you got Justin Herbert, quarterback out of Oregon. Really the least impressive person in this watch list, but I guess they needed to throw someone in that were not the normal names. And this guy is good. He's very good for his team. As we all know, the Heisman watch and the Heisman should not be all about numbers and whether or not your team wins, but the value of the player to the team. Last year, he completed about 59.5% of his passes. For just over 3,000 or 3,100 yards, 29 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. I think his completion rate for that, if you're going off of stats, really isn't all that great, but I understand what Oregon did last year as a team it was invaluable to them. They pulled off a couple of big upsets, and they're going to be poised in the Pac-12 this year, and I'll go over that later. Number 4 on this list, 4 out of 5, is Sam Ehlinger from the quarterback of the Texas Longhorns. This guy, it really impressed me last year. I loved watching him play. Now, he's got a much better completion percentage at 64.5%. He threw for almost 3,300 yards, 25 touchdowns, 500 yards rushing with 16 touchdowns on top of that. So you're talking 41 touchdowns on his shoulders. And let me tell you something about this guy. It's the intangibles that make this guy what he was last year. And we really need to pay attention to what he's going to do this year to see if he can continue on that and stay healthy. To me, Sam Ehlinger is not necessarily a top 5, maybe even a top 10 quarterback in a lot of the traditional categories. There's a lot of good players out there, a lot of good quarterbacks out there. His arm strength is not quite there. Now, this is all based on what we saw last year. However, he's worked in the offseason. Tom Herman and his coaching staff, they've worked with him. From what I understand, they've done a lot of drills. He was first one in, last one out. Spent some time outside of hours doing his own thing. So the thing I think that brings Sam Ehlinger into the picture is the fact, again, not his arm strength so much. His accuracy is there. And last year it was there, and I think it may be better this year. His receiving course coming back. He's got good help in the backfield for blocking and an extra guy to be able to pass to with their running back. What I see in him, though, is that although he doesn't run much, 500 yards rushing for a quarterback, even on the college level, is not very high. Okay, we obviously have seen many more. We're going to go over one here in a minute. But what he does is he's not a run, get out there, dodge around, get out of bounds kind of guy or slide. This guy runs over people. And that extra 1 or 2 yards is very important, especially down in the red zone within the 5-yard line. So he's going to be somebody to watch. Another one that started to get a little more popular that I don't think a lot of people are thinking about is out in the Big Ten. And his name is Jonathan Taylor. He's a running back from Wisconsin. And as we know, Wisconsin has put out some pretty good running backs in the past. They've always had a good rushing game when their team can come together. This guy's no different. Last year, he had 307 carries for 2,200 yards and 16 TDs. His yards per carry were over 7 yards for the season. To me, that is someone who can run the ball. That is somebody who you can depend on game in and game out as long as they're healthy to get you those needed yards, and especially on first down. A lot of his yards were on first and third downs. He can get you closer to your first down marker and give you more options. So keep an eye on him. Wisconsin starts ranked. We're going to go over how the Big Ten's going to fare later on, but we'll kind of see. Sean, you're right, and I do believe, going back to Sam Ehlinger, that he is kind of their version of Baker Mayfield. He really gets the players going. I saw him in the second half of last year in the games I was able to watch. He became a very vocal leader off the field, on the sidelines, and they respected him on the field. So on the sidelines, I did see him talking a lot, boosting people up, going over things. Even when he made the mistake, he would go over, point it out, get help from other people. So yeah, I think he was definitely valuable to the team. And Philip, you're right. UNT, let me tell you something about UNT. Mason Fine out there is a superb quarterback, and he should be much higher on the list in the Heisman Watch talks. But unfortunately, right now, starting off the season, he's not. He had a great season last year. UNT had a great season last year. Watch for them this year. I know they're in a conference that, as a whole, may not get as much respect, but these guys are good. And remember, they play the same teams every year as well. So really, there's no difference between their biggest game and someone else's biggest game. They have to fight just as hard against that other team. And I tell you what, UNT is going to be fun to watch. If you can find them on TV this year, give them a shot, guys. And Mason Fine, watch his numbers. He's going to be good. He may start doing start popping up on that watch list probably about halfway through the season, especially with the kind of schedule they have. Another one that obviously then you've got your top two, right? You have Tua from Alabama. He had the highest completion rate. I'll give him that. He had 69%. That out of all the Heisman watch list contenders going into this season, he had the highest completion percentage. He threw for almost 4,000 yards, 43 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. He had 190 yards rushing and 5 TDs, which tells me one or two things. Either they use him as a gimmick play right there on the goal line a couple of times throughout the year, or he happens to step forward a couple of times a year and finds a pocket that he's able to run through. This guy's not a running quarterback, which is odd considering the first game he played in the national championship game 2 years ago, he ran a lot more. Looks like Nick Saban's kind of curbed that, or he just hasn't had to, or maybe that's just not really his wheelhouse. We'll find out this year. Passing yards, it was very odd to watch. Alabama became more of a passing team 2 years ago, and then last year. I don't know if it's a lack of solid running back, if their offensive line's beat up. Not beat up, just not what they used to be, the caliber they used to be. But they're more of a passing team, and they have some good receivers, some pro-style receivers that can really climb the ladder and get the ball. We'll see how Tua does throughout this season. The schedule is stacked against them this year, so we'll get into that here in a minute as well. The last guy that's on the list, Trevor Lawrence out of Clemson. He started about halfway through the year last year, and actually the first time he played was week 2 against A&M. First pass was a touchdown, kind of a fluke thing. His receiver helped him out on that. After that, he kind of eased his way into it. Starter got hurt. He came in, and I tell you what, he took off running. This guy is really, really good. I don't pay that much attention to his numbers, though. We're talking 65.2% completion percentage, just under 3,300 yards, 30 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. The numbers aren't these big gaudy numbers, right? And I don't believe, unfortunately for me, my opinion, I don't necessarily believe he is invaluable to the team. I think that Clemson has had also a good run of quarterbacks, just like Oklahoma has, where they could find another quarterback. If they had another quarterback, I think Clemson could do just as well. The last quarterback they had, the one that Trevor Lawrence replaced, won the national championship the year before, or at least went to it, right? So I think what helps Clemson out is, A, they've got a running back who should also be on the list. I'm telling you right now, Travis Etienne, right? He's the running back for Clemson. The guy is pretty good. He had about 1,700 yards rushing and 24 TDs. Lots of short yardage TDs. They're his go-to guy for short yardage situations, and he can do it. Big guy, but I think that really helps out the team. So I think it's a duo there. Personally, going into this season, I don't see Trevor Lawrence as being the guy to win the Heisman based on the credentials that the Heisman is supposed to be about. Plus, you've got an offense. The other thing is you've got an offense going up against ACC schools. Guys, ACC's a mess. We're going to go into that in just a minute. And Sean, you are right. Hurts is going to end up there in the conversation. Why he's not in there now, I'm not completely sure, other than it's the way he left Alabama. See, he goes in, he wins a national championship, follows it up with getting the team to the national championship. Tua comes in, does his thing, and I think that Alabama, every team out there needs to watch for him for one simple reason, is if they decide to put in their backup quarterback, you're done, and that's what it was. And the problem is Jalen Hurts is going to be a good fit for OU's offense. He really is. The reason why is because your last 2 quarterbacks have been very good passing the ball. They've been pretty decent running the ball, and they've been vocal leaders. From what I've seen in camp so far this year for Oklahoma, and the stories that I've gone into, some of the videos I've watched, Hurts has come in, eased his way in. The team really accepted him. And just like that, he took over that vocal leadership with the team. They really respect him. They respect what he's done. And he respects what Lincoln Riley's doing out there, the offense that they're running. And I think their personnel is exactly what it needs to be for Jalen to be able to end his career, but continue it the way it has been. No worries at all for OU on offense. But those are your Heisman contenders starting off the season, obviously all just based off of last year. Buddy, the season's getting started. Who knows what's going to happen? All right, let's talk top 25. Okay, so I'm sure everybody's seen out there, the AP Top 25 just came out this week. And let me tell you something. Although I'm not really drinking the Kool-Aid for anybody outside of the top 5. However, inside the top 5, I do agree with pretty much all the picks they put in there. Let me tell you why. Clemson, obviously, they are defending national champions, and there is no reason to believe the way they finished last year it's going to be any different this year of how successful they're going to be, especially, again, through a weak ACC conference. Should that hinder them? I don't believe so. All right. And the reason why is I don't ever believe in penalizing an undefeated team that continues to be undefeated. Unless they go up against somebody like Duke or North Carolina or something like that and they squeak out an overtime win. Yes, they're still undefeated. That's a team that if you're number one in the nation, you should not be squeaking out in overtime. You should, and especially if you do this 2 or 3 times like they did last year, I think you still stay in the top 4 spots. Maybe you get bumped down. Personally, I believe Alabama last year, that game against the Citadel towards the beginning of the season or in the middle of the season, guys, you are the number 1 team in the nation. You're the number 1 team in the nation for many years now. Over the last 10 years, you've had one of the best records in football. You go up against somebody like the Citadel, and you come very close to losing that game. Me, as a voter, I would have knocked them down out of the number 1 spot to maybe 2 or 3. They're still in the spot to be able to make the playoffs as long as they keep winning, but they're not there. And if you've got somebody maybe outside the top 5 that blows out a ranked opponent, they should be able to jump a top 4 team that barely got by a team that has lost most of their games. So Clemson, Alabama, are the usual suspects, as Sean says, and rightfully so right now. I don't think Alabama's going to stay there, and I'll tell you why in a little bit. Georgia, I had a little bit of an issue with Georgia being up there. However, I understand why it happened. Look, Georgia was a runner-up in the SEC last year. But they lost to Texas here in Texas in the bowl game. Now, at the time, Texas was not as highly ranked as they are going into this season. It was a very down note. They lost 2 games in a row at the end of the season, both the SEC championship game and the bowl game. But they are picked to win the SEC East, which, again, I disagree with, but that's how they put it up there. People have no reason to believe that they're going to slide off that much this year. Oklahoma, I'm sorry, you took a team to the playoffs 2 years in a row. You get the respect. I'm sorry, you've had 2 Heisman Trophy winners. You've had a nation's top leading offense, or at least a top 10 offense for the last couple of years. There is no reason to believe you're going to slow down. Look, your defense can't get... No offense, your defense can't get any worse than it has been with this new coach. You've got the same players. They know the same schemes. This new coach is going to bring in some new stuff. Sure, they might have some learning curves, but they've got a little wiggle room to do it against their first game against Houston, right? And a little bit going into the season. I don't expect their defense to work or to get worse. I expect OU's defense to actually get a little bit better, but it's going to take some time. It's going to get slower through the season. But I do believe that they deserve to be in the number 4 spot. Why not? They've proven themselves the last couple of years in a row, and as far as preseason rankings go, I have no doubt that they deserve to be there again. Ohio State. This one, I believe, in my opinion, considering the number of ranked teams that you have in the Big Ten this year, and especially the number of ranked teams that Ohio State plays, not sure I would have started them off in the top 5. let's look at last year a little bit. They were picked to be a favorite to go into the playoffs. Halfway through the season, they were picked to win the first game of the playoffs, make it into the national championship game. Everybody was on board with that. Then they lose their wheels. They lose by 30 some odd points to Purdue. Come on, guys. Purdue. Granted, that was their only loss, and I get that. They had a close game against a couple other schools, but you cannot be a playoff contender and lose to someone like Purdue. You need to lose. If you're going to lose to somebody, you need to lose early, and you need to lose somebody better than you. That's not what happened. Putting them at number 5 this year, I think, was a gimme. They expect Ohio State to be like they were last year, just as good, run through there, avoid the mistakes, they get in. I give them that. Let's see what happens. We're going to go over that a little bit here, too, about how the Big Ten looks. Starting to go down the rest of these in chunks, I do agree with most of them, except for numbers 6 through 9. Notre Dame, I do believe, just based, again, on what they did. Oh, hello, Jenny. How are you doing? The wife has shown up. She wanted to say hi to everybody. Thank you, Darwin, for showing up there. And just so that you guys know, she says she knows nothing of football. I tell you what, though, on Saturdays, every Saturday, there's at least one game she'll sit down and watch with me. And she knows more than she likes to put on there. So, talking about LSU, Michigan, Florida, and Notre Dame. I would mix those up completely. First of all, Notre Dame, I think, should be in the 6th spot. In the preseason rankings, remember, this has nothing to do with the rest of the season so far. Okay? They do play a lot of teams on the road, but I just don't see them going unscathed this year. They lost some players. But you know what? They're also a team that's made the playoffs last year. Why start them off any higher? They're going to lose that spot, so don't get hyped up on the fact that I said they should be number 6. The preseason rankings are basically just their future schedule, who they've lost, and what they did by the end of last year. All right? Michigan, I would leave at number 7. LSU and Florida, I would put at 8 and 9. All right? And that's kind of where I would put it. And Florida being ranked that high, should they be off of last year? No. Probably not. We'll get into that, although they had a great 10-3 season last year, 9-3, and then a win in the bowl game. And I think they're going to be better, but I think they need to earn that top 10 spot this year. Texas is another one at number 10. I do believe, yes, they had a great season. They ended strong last year, okay? They did not make the conference championship game. They went to a bowl game. They played a very tough team in the Pac-12. I do believe on that, and I do believe the Pac-12 is going to inch their way into the top 10, not with one team, with 2 by the end of the year. Texas A&M being at number 12. I feel with the schedule coming up, that is a very optimistic look for them, or in a very optimistic ranking. I tell you right now, darn it. Looks like we went offline. We're going to try this again. All right. I can't tell if we're back in business on the same stream or not. Uh, we'll take a look here. Looks like we've just got a couple of people um, in. So let's. Okay. It looks like we're back. We have the same chat. So let me know if you guys are seeing the live video real quick. Shoot me a little message here and let me know. Okay. Looks like we're in here. Good. All right. Sorry about that, guys. Don't know what happened. The whole looks like the whole block went dark for a second. So, picking up where we left off, Texas A&M, I do not believe is going to hold on to that 12th spot. I think it's very optimistic. Had a great season last year. Ended the season well, but I'm not sure that they're going to hold on to that 12th spot. There are so many bad games for us this year. I just don't know what to think of it. But it's a good starting spot. Hopefully we can stay in the top 25 this year, but we'll see. Washington is the other Pac-12 team that should be ranked that high, and I actually have them picked to do very well this year. The rest of the pack looks about right for me. However, there are a couple of them. Surprised me a little bit. Love that they're in there. Iowa State, Syracuse, and Nebraska being in the top 25. The biggest surprise, I think, is Nebraska. Abysmal season last year under a brand new coach, Scott Frost. It's gonna turn around for them. He's gonna do well with them this year. They're a decent bowl team this year. I picked them at least 9 wins. Iowa State, watch out, guys. They are no longer just going to be a home team advantage. They are going to win on the road this year. Don't know who it's going to be, but it will happen. Well, Wall State, they're at 23. They are going to do pretty well. The Pirate out there, Mike Leach has done a great job turning that school around. I think he might be on his way out in the next couple years. This will be a very important year for him. I'm hoping they don't stay stagnant. They need another horse in that race over there in the Pac-12 outside of just Washington and Oregon this year. But we'll see. Hopefully they'll do. Nebraska, I tell you what, man, Nebraska is going to be a decent team. Like I said, under Scott Frost's second year, you watch out for them. All right. Let's talk a little bit about the conferences and where I think the 4 members of the playoff teams are going to come from. Now, first of all, you've got the ACC. Clemson is going to the playoffs this year. Why, though? Because they're not going to lose. There is one team on their schedule that should give them fits, and that's going to be a highly ranked Syracuse team, or will be ranked at that time. And I say that because I believe that Syracuse is going to finish 10-2. They finished very well last year. But the ACC top to bottom is probably the weakest top 5 conference out there. And I don't see that changing this year. So Clemson, you've got a good road. I'm not taking anything away from Clemson's abilities. They are very well coached. They have a lot of talent on that team, but they also aren't going to have a whole lot of competition. So we're going to take an independent. We're going to take Notre Dame. Notre Dame is not going to make the playoffs this year, folks. It's not going to happen. I don't see them being as strong as they were last year. They play at number 3 Georgia, at number 7 Michigan, and they play a couple other ones that I think are going to give them a little bit of fits this year as well. The rest of their schedule seems to be pretty easy. Those 2 losses right there are going to keep them out, as that should. Our next one in the Big Ten, I tell you what, the Big Ten is gonna be tough this year. However, Well, let me go ahead and mention this. Michigan plays 5 ranked opponents, all in the Big Ten. They're playing number 19 at number 19 Wisconsin, at home versus Iowa, at Penn State. Then they play at home versus Notre Dame, and at home versus Ohio State. Michigan, I think, has one of the toughest schedules in the Big Ten. It's going to be fun to watch them, though. My money is on Michigan winning more games. I think they take it away from Ohio State. And I do believe that they win against Wisconsin, Iowa, and Penn State. The rubber game for them is going to be Notre Dame. They're going to either beat Notre Dame and lose to Ohio State, or they're going to beat Ohio State and lose to Notre Dame. I don't think they win both. Ohio State has also got Nebraska, Michigan State, Wisconsin, Penn State, and Michigan. I see 2 losses in there for Ohio State. Penn State has the same type of schedule. They play 4 ranked opponents, all within the Big Ten. Wisconsin plays all 5 as well. I think that the Big Ten is good, but I believe that the Big Ten is going to beat themselves out of the playoffs again this year. And let's not forget teams like Purdue, Northwestern, Illinois. These teams are going to these teams are going to beat somebody they shouldn't. And it's going to be one of these 5 ranked teams. So they're going to beat themselves out of the playoffs. Over in the Pac-12, I got 2 horses over there that could and should bring the Pac-12 into the playoffs for the first time. That's Oregon and that's Washington. Look, Oregon plays number 16 Auburn. First game of the season. I believe it's here in Dallas, as a matter of fact. That's a big test. They get by that Auburn squad first game of the year. That sets them up for complete success. They play at Stanford. I don't see Stanford staying in the top 25 at midway through the season. And then at some point they play at Washington. I tell you what, this game was a thriller last year. Came down towards the overtime. Oregon ended up winning it. I don't believe Washington is going to allow that to happen again at home. And I think that's the game that they need to win more than any other that late in the season. And that's the game I think they lose. Then they also play at home against Washington State. So, big schedule. If they can navigate it and they win, Oregon is your Pac-12 team in the playoffs. I don't think that happens. I tell you what I think happens is you've got Washington, the Huskies. And let me tell you why. They play at number 25 Stanford. Then the rest of their ranked schedule stacks in their favor. All of their other ranked teams they play against, they play at home. They play Oregon at home. They play Utah at home. And they play Washington State at home. Let me tell you something. You win those 3 home games, there is no reason why when you finish the season undefeated and you blow out somebody like Colorado in the Pac-12 championship game, why you don't make it into the playoffs. Washington, I would love for you to be the team. Bring your purple, bring your Huskies, get into the playoffs this year. Love to see the Pac-12 finally make it. We're going to head back east a little bit, talk a little bit about the SEC. You've got your normal top 4. You've got Alabama, LSU, and you've got Georgia and Florida in the East. Let me tell you something, guys. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but Alabama very well could miss the playoffs this year. As a matter of fact, I'm picking that they do. I think the team that knocks them out in their own conference is going to be LSU. Look, it's not that I think Alabama's going downhill. It's not like I think they're a bad team. Look, their bad years are as good as anybody else's good years. They're a very well-coached team. However, they're stagnant. We saw it last year. They're on cruise control, and I think even with their great recruiting, they can't go up too far from where they're at. However, their competition, the rest of the SEC, they're out of conference, the people that would make the bowl games in the playoffs, that competition is actually rising, and they're matching Alabama. Alabama is going to have a tough time getting through the SEC undefeated this year. LSU is going to do it. Auburn may do it. That's the end of the year. That's a big game. That's a rivalry game. Anything can happen in those. Auburn, I think, is going to be right there, good enough to hang with most people. I don't think anybody else in the West is going to beat Alabama. That's A&M included. As far as A&M's concerned, going into the SEC conference this year, guys, there are 2 teams in the nation that play the top 3 ranked teams in Clemson, Alabama, and Georgia. One of those is South Carolina. The other one is Texas A&M. South Carolina also plays a top 10 ranked Florida team. A&M also adds to their resume a top 10 LSU team, and the A&M also plays a top 16 Auburn team. I feel that all these teams are still going to be ranked as high, if not higher, when A&M plays them. So, guys, those of y'all thinking Jimbo Fisher's second year is going to be just, the step up they need, it's not. When it comes to wins, it is just not going to happen this year. That is almost 4 guaranteed losses with an extra loss on top of it, possibly. So you also have the same thing with South Carolina. The Gamecocks have just as hard a schedule. I don't see them getting out of the bottom either. However, Georgia and Florida, I do not believe Georgia is going to be the team on top of the SEC East. Look, Florida went 10-3 last year with their bowl win. Dan Mullen's first year at Florida went as good or better than anybody thought that it was going to go, me included. They start off this Saturday night. They start off playing Miami. That's a rivalry game in the state of Florida. Now, Miami is not a ranked team. However, they have a first coach in Manny Diaz that I think is going to take them much further this year. I think they win 9 games this year. And this will be a good test for Florida. Florida comes out of the Miami game this weekend. I think they're looking good. Now let's talk about the toughest conference to determine, I think, in the country right now, and that is the Big 12. And let me tell you something. For the last 10 years, the Big 12 has really, honestly, and truly been a one-horse conference when it comes to who's dependable to get a chance into the playoff or the BCS National Championship games. It's not always the same horse, but it's usually one with everybody else falling on the wayside, minus a couple of years where you had both Oklahoma and Oklahoma State both being in there. Not the case this year. Let me tell you, it comes down to Oklahoma and Texas. And I know this is a story everybody's preparing on, they're waiting for, they know about, they've been saying it for years. Guys, Oklahoma, again, going back, they're not missing a step. If anything else, their defense makes an improvement or two. They can. Their offense is going to be just as good, if not better than what they were with Kyler Murray. Look, Jalen Hurts doesn't have the speed, but he does have the legs. He has the bullying power. He's got the respect. He's got the arm. Okay, maybe he doesn't quite have the arm that Murray did, but there's going to be less jump balls than what Murray threw. Murray's arm actually impressed me last year. But, look, Oklahoma's got it made. Oklahoma has 3 games they have to worry about this year. Obviously, your big matchup on October 12th here in the old Cotton Bowl in Dallas, Texas, against the Longhorns. That one is going to be a defining game for them. More so, though, you're going to move forward a few weeks. They play Iowa State at home. Iowa State gave them fits when they were on the road at Iowa State in Ames last year. I'm telling you guys, Iowa State is a different team. They're going to play some close, tough games on the road. Guys in Oklahoma, watch out. Even though you're playing Iowa State at home, this needs to be a statement game. Look, the Red River game is always a big one. But it is early enough in the season that, as you saw last year, a loss does not ruin your season. It was a close loss. You're able to recover. People count those points as, guess what? It's a rivalry. It can go either way. You can throw everything out the window, right? So don't hang your hat on the Red River game. It's the Iowa State game. You come out of Norman with that game in hand by 3 touchdowns, let's say, and you have held them to a low-scoring game on their end. I'm telling you, the voters cannot overlook that. You're golden. And then, of course, the Bedlam game. I'm sorry, you guys are at Oklahoma State. I do not see Oklahoma State being as tough of a team as they were last year or the year before. I don't think if they make it into the rankings this season, it's going to be barely, and I think they may even get knocked back out of it. Texas, on the other side here, let me tell you something. The Longhorns, again, this is a defining year for them. Of course, you've got the Red River game. I'm going to say the same thing I said for Oklahoma, though. That's not the game you hang your hat on. That's your major tradition game. That is important. That's your bragging rights. And yes, it's going to mean something come towards the end of the season. But why? Because I think you and Oklahoma are going to play in the conference championship game. You're going to need this game. You really are. However, your statement game this year, the first one circled on your calendar. This is the game that most people across the country have circled on their calendar to watch. And in the month of August, when it came to preseason ticket sales for any game, any part of the season throughout the country, this is the game that's been the hardest to find and the most expensive tickets as far as the month of August ticket sales. That is LSU traveling to Austin, 2 top 10 teams, number 6 versus number 10. This one is huge, guys. Let me tell you something. Texas wins this game at home. They've got a confidence level that they are just going to thrive on the rest of the season, and everybody watch out. The reason why I say that, their last game that they played in a bowl game, an SEC powerhouse in Georgia, absolutely destroyed them, stopped them from doing anything. If they do the same thing to LSU, Big 12, you are on notice. Country, you are on notice. These guys were for real. And Tom Herman's got them going in the right direction. Look, Charlie Strong got them to where they needed to be as far as the recruiting, the frame of mind, and the disciplinary issues. Tom Herman's been able to come in, build on that, and he's done a great job. So the other game that Texas has to worry about, Oklahoma fans, you're lucky. You get Iowa State at home. Guess what, Texas? You don't. Towards the end of the season, you've got to travel to Ames, Iowa. And tell you what, watch out for these guys at home on the road. This is where you cannot walk in with your confidence level that you've gotten from the season. This one's tough. And let me tell you something. Iowa State is going to beat some people they shouldn't. Now, in saying that, I don't consider Iowa State to be this dark horse. I don't expect them to be so surprising. The teams that they beat, that maybe their underdogs win, it'll be exciting, but not that surprising. I tell you who's going to be surprising in the Big 12? Baylor and Oklahoma State. You heard it, guys. I said Baylor. Look, Texas Tech, they just lost Cliff Kingsbury. They didn't lose him. They fired him, and for good reason. They brought in a new coach. This team is going to be in a shambles right now. Texas, you don't have to worry about this rivalry game at the end of the season. Trust me. Texas Tech's not going to be up there. Look, Kansas, I'm sorry, guys. Kansas is still Kansas this year. Watch them to play some better defense, and they're going to start teaching defense around a little bit the league. They're going to bring some people up. Look, Kansas State, Bill Snyder, love that coach. Utmost respect. Anybody that's able to coach in a stadium that is already named after them deserves all the respect in the world. They just don't have the talent this year. But Texas and Oklahoma, watch out for Baylor. Look, last year they still didn't win a whole lot of games, right? But their talent level, you saw it progressing throughout the season. They played better and better and better. They've got a quarterback that has really got it going with the receivers. He gets these receivers back. With their weakness, of course, is going to be their running backs and their secondary. But they're working on that. So watch out for them. In Oklahoma State, Texas and Oklahoma both need to watch out for these guys. Look, they're not going to be world beaters this year. Matter of fact, I think this is a very down year for Oklahoma State. Heck, they just brought in and signed a 29-year-old or 27-year-old to come in on scholarship, right? They actually made a joke about the fact that this guy's married. They live on campus, and they have curfews just like every other football player in America. They do bed checks, and the wife said, you know what, that was kind of weird the first night. They did a bed check on us, make sure we were in our place on time. They've called off the bed check. This guy is old enough. There is no bed check for him on the football team. So look, Oklahoma State, they're going to be decent. They're going to win some games. Outside of the rivalry game with Oklahoma, and they've developed quite the rivalry with Texas as well. But I believe Texas and Oklahoma both come out of the Oklahoma games or Oklahoma State games battered, but they're not bruised, they're not broken, they're going to be all right. So, the last little bit here, let's talk about the upcoming games this weekend, folks. Listen, you've got an 8th-ranked Florida Gators traveling to the University of Miami. This is going to be a fun game. I can't say it any better than that. This is going to be a lot of fun to watch. Look, Miami Hurricanes, they got Manny Diaz as a first-year coach. Last year, they went 7-5 with losses to LSU, Virginia, Boston College, Duke, Georgia Tech, and then they lost to Wisconsin. Look, Wisconsin and LSU, those guys were ranked and ended the year ranked. But I tell you what, Miami was not supposed to do even as well as 7-5. I expect them to do a little better this year. I told you I expect them to win probably 9 games with the ACC schedule. But it ain't going to be starting off that way, guys. They lose to Florida in this one. Dan Mullen in his second year, look, in his first year, he took a Florida school that was looked down upon. People thought that they were going to go nowhere. They took it by storm. Dan Mullen came in, first year went, 10-3. Yeah, 10-3. The losses were to Kentucky, Georgia, and Missouri, and they had a bowl win over number 7, Michigan. Look, Georgia, that loss, okay, Georgia went on to the SEC championship game, was one step away, was a couple of plays away from making it to the playoffs. Sure, they lose that one. Kentucky, you're talking about a 31-year drought for Kentucky against the Gators. They wanted it. They were ranked. They had Benny Snell Jr. They had everything going in their favor when they walked into Florida, and they took it. So I don't blame Florida too much for that one. But Missouri? Come on. But I tell you what, a 10-3 season last year was great. I think this year they build on that. Sorry, Miami. I don't see you leaving this game with your first win of the season. You're going to have to wait till week 2 when you play a much lesser opponent. The next game, I tell you what, this is the late game, right? This one starts late. This one is going to be the Arizona Wildcats traveling to Hawaii to play on the Rainbow Warriors. Look, the head coach over there at Hawaii, Nick Rolovich, this is his 4th year there. He has not been impressive. Hawaii had a stint many years ago where they came out and they were legitimately a tough team to beat. They've gone downhill again. Last year they went 8-6 with losses to Army, BYU, Nevada, Fresno State, and Utah State. Now, those are not bad quality teams, but they're not world beater teams either. Hawaii is not. I'm not sure what to think about them this season. We'll wait and find out. On the other side of the ball, you've got the Arizona Wildcats. Look, Kevin Sumlin's first year in Arizona was abysmal. Absolutely horrible. One of the teams that gave him nasty flashbacks towards the end of the season was UCLA. I knew he walked into that stadium just trembling. But he went 5-7. And this was with a quarterback at the time that could have been at least a Heisman watch candidate. He had a running back that was also up there. He had a decent offensive line and defensive secondary. And he did nothing with it. And look, no hard feelings from A&M to someone. I hoped he would have done better last year. He didn't. Guys, someone, I don't think you're going to have a great year this year either. I'm sorry. But I tell you what's going to happen. You are going to walk into Hawaii and start your season with another loss. That's my prediction for this game. Hawaii's going to hold their own at home. Arizona's going to come back. They're going to have to wait for their first home game before a win. I hope it changes their luck this year. It's fun to watch them out there in the desert. I love watching the Arizona State game. It's always a good time. But I think, again, they start this season with a loss. So, now, Sean, what does that mean, leave it to the Aggie? Come on. Oh, jinxing the horns. I got it. Well, you know what? I jinxed a lot of people tonight. I plan on jinxing a lot more along the way. You know, who knows who it'll help, right? But, guys, look, the games this weekend, one of them is a great game. Take some time. Try to watch it. It's early enough. I believe it's a 7:30 game. I'm sorry, a 6:30 game here, 6 o'clock game here in the Dallas area. And then you've got the really late game. It's going to be a 9:30 start in Hawaii. I tell you what, look, Hawaii, Arizona, can be kind of a snoozer a game. Look, college football is college football. That's a game I'm also going to watch. I think you guys should tune into it. It's the first 2 games of the season. So, that being said, I really appreciate everybody joining in today. There were a couple of technical difficulties. I'm going to get those cleaned up before next week. And Buckeyes all the way. I see. All right. You know, well, I gave you my opinion on Ohio State earlier. They're going to be a great team. I think that their schedule, though, in the Big Ten just takes them out of it again. Matter of fact, the whole Big Ten gets left out again. Pac-12 makes their way in. Big 12 is going to make it in again. And we will see you guys next week. Same place. I'll send the invite out. And we'll get this thing going. Thanks again for stopping by. And let's get prepared for the season. Go football.